What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Khamzat Chimaev shuts down Francis Ngannou's fighter pay complaints. While the MMA world collectively waits for the return of Francis Ngannou, everyone is collectively holding their breath in regards to the champ's ongoing contract negotiations. While the hope was that Ngannou would be ready to return to the octagon by the end of the year for a blockbuster showdown with Jon Jones, the champ's timeline was delayed while he recovers from knee surgery. Although a fight between Jones and Ngannou was reportedly in the works for 2023, the champ recently appeared on a podcast where he revealed that the UFC had yet to address some of the concerns he raised regarding the UFC's exclusive contracts. As he explained at the time, for fighters like him, the contracts weren't the end of the world, but for up-and-coming fighters earning $20,000 to show and $20,000 to win, the fact that they couldn't also go fight elsewhere seemed unfair. The way streaking contender Khamzat Chimaev sees things, however, Ngannou is way off base when it comes to fighter pay. He shot back in an interview with Brett Okamoto, saying,
"A lot of guys talking about UFC don't give us like good money and that things, you know. They go back and where they've been 1, 2, 3 years ago. They don't remember that, you know. I was homeless almost, you know, so there are a lot of guys as well. And the big guy, what is his name, Ngannou, he talking about they don't give him like good money and these things. And he was speaking about he live on the outside before, but he don't do it now, right now, you know. But has to appreciate everything's happening with you. Just fight, the money coming."
By the sound of things, the UFC is hoping to book a heavyweight showdown between Ngannou and Jones for next year. Right now, many are speculating that the promotion could very well book the fight for International Fight Week this summer. The card, which takes place around 4th of July weekend, is traditionally one of the biggest of the year for the UFC. Whether or not negotiations with the UFC stall, only time will tell. Michael Chandler reflects on UFC 281 loss to Poirier. On the main card of UFC 281, former Bellator MMA champion Michael Chandler stepped into the octagon for a highly anticipated showdown with former interim champion Dustin Poirier. The fight delivered on all counts. Early on, Chandler seemed to be in control of the fight, pushing the pace on the feet while getting the better of Poirier in the grappling exchanges. As the fight ebbed and flowed, things began to swing Poirier's way. After enduring a fish-hooking attempt from Chandler and eating several shots to the back of the head, it was Poirier who was able to take control of the fight. In the third round, he put on a masterful grappling performance, blocking the back take of Chandler before winding up in an advantageous position and winning the fight. Although Chandler lost the bout, he still believes he's winning. He spoke in a video released on his YouTube page while reflecting on the bout, saying,
UFC 281, Madison Square Garden, New York City. I did not get my hand raised, but I still feel like I'm winning. I feel like I'm winning because I have grown so accustomed to setbacks and pain and failure, knowing that those things, those feelings, those milestones in my life, albeit not great milestones, are turning me into and growing me into, forcing me into the man that I am supposed to be.
So far, no word yet as to what's next for Chandler. As it stands right now, his UFC record is 2-3. Following the loss of Poirier, Iron Mike will have to put together some sort of a win streak if he wants to work his way towards a shot at newly crowned champion Islam Makhachev. Joe Rogan calls massive weight cutting sanctioned cheating. Weight cutting has long been one of the most controversial practices in all of MMA. While fighters who come from a wrestling background are familiar with the grueling process of cutting weight, the practice is extremely harmful to a person's health. Over the years, fight fans have seen some horribly botched weight cuts, from fighters like Aspen Ladd nearly fainting on the scale, to fighters like Khabib Nurmagomedov being forced out of fights as a result of mishaps. There have been calls to make the weigh-in process safer. While organizations like ONE FC have weight-cutting policies that prevent fighters from cutting too much weight, they're largely shrouded in mystery with a clear set of guidelines made available to the public. Just this summer, 9 fighters failed hydration tests, causing a massive ordeal leading up to a ONE FC card. The idea behind the system is that fighters are weighed during the course of their training camp. They are then only allowed to cut so much weight to fight. If a fighter has to cut too much weight, they'll eventually be forced to move up in weight. Considering the damage that cutting weight does to an individual's brain, it makes sense to minimize the amount of weight cutting an individual does. The way Joe Rogan sees things, when fighters like Alex Pereira cut massive amounts of weight to fight smaller fighters like Alex Pereira does to make 185 pounds, it's sanctioned cheating. He spoke on a recent episode of his podcast with Steve-O to discuss Pereira reportedly weighing 220 pounds when he stepped into the octagon.
Yeah, I mean, It's a bull thing. It's basically sanctioned cheating. It really is, but everybody does it.
Unfortunately, by the sound of things, there's no end to weight cutting in sight. While some fighters like Frankie Edgar will always defy the odds by competing at their natural weight and being undersized, the vast majority of fighters will continue to cut as much weight as they can. Before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love, and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all the latest news. Derrick Lewis withdraws from main event mid-card. Saturday afternoon, fight fans tuned in for what was expected to be an action-packed night of fights in Vegas. Unfortunately, midway through the card, it was revealed on the broadcast that headlining fighter Derrick Lewis was forced out of his bout with Sergey Spivak after he was taken to the hospital. While there was no specific cause given for his withdrawal, it was confirmed on the broadcast that the medical issue was not COVID-19. So far, no word yet as to whether or not Lewis was released from the hospital or if he had to be admitted. The fight cancellation will prevent Lewis from potentially snapping a two-fight skid that saw him drop back-to-back losses to Tai Tuivasa and Sergey Pavlovich. It's been a rough go for Lewis, who fought for the interim championship during the summer of 2021. Over the course of the last year, Lewis's spot in the UFC's heavyweight rankings has continued to plummet. So far, no word yet from Lewis, who will hopefully be able to return to action sooner rather than later. On the flip side of things, the late cancellation prevented the UFC from finding a replacement fighter for Spivak, who was riding a two-fight win streak into the bout. So far this year, Spivak has picked up back-to-back KO wins, defeating Greg Hardy to kick off the year, before then finishing Augusto Sakai this summer. Stay tuned for updates as they become available. And now for our breaking news story of the day. Khamzat Chimaev calls out Gilbert Burns for rematch in Brazil. Next year, the UFC will make its highly anticipated return to Brazil for what's expected to be a stacked UFC 283 pay-per-view card in South America. Although the event won't feature the King of Rio, Jose Aldo, the hope is that the UFC will continue to pad the card with Brazilian fighters. Gilbert Burns has continued to seek out a fight for the card, first looking for a fight with a top-ranked prospect to move him closer to a title shot before then opening the door to a fight with anyone in the welterweight division. Although Burns hadn't called for a rematch with Khamzat Chimaev, one may have found him. Chimaev posted on Instagram after calling for a fight with Alex Pereira in Brazil to issue a separate challenge for Burns for a rematch at middleweight. The call-out seemed to come out of left field after Chimaev was linked to a #1 contender fight against Colby Covington. Although the fight was never finalized, UFC President Dana White revealed that the promotion was working to book it. From the sound of things, Chimaev is just eager to fight anyone. Whether it's a fight with middleweight champion Alex Pereira, a fight with Gilbert Burns in Brazil, or a #1 contender fight with Colby Covington, the former Swedish national wrestling champion seems game for a fight regardless of his opponent. Burns, of course, has been closely linked to a fight with Jorge Masvidal, who was accused of turning down a fight with Burns on several occasions. Masvidal fired back in a video this week calling for a fight on the UFC's highly anticipated rumored UK card in 2023. While nothing has been made official, the expectation is that the UFC will put a trilogy fight between Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards as the headliner of a UK pay-per-view card. With so many options on the table, who do you want to see Chimaev fight next? Play matchmaker in the comments section below. Thank you so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.